What's up guys, and welcome back to another Revit Tools video. In this video we'll be covering the paint tool, which is also removing paint, as well as the split face tool. Let's get right into it. I've got a few different kinds of elements sitting out here so that we can begin to look at what the paint tool does and how it interacts with different kinds of elements. So what is the paint tool? The paint tool, it's pretty simple. It's simply applying a material to a surface and in the form of paint. And there's paint versus not paint. We'll get into that a little later, but it's fairly simple. It's one of the two ways of applying a material, because you can apply a material through the actual properties of an element, and so that element will then take on that material, or you can use this paint and we can start to paint some of these different objects. So when I hit the paint dialog, I get a list of all of my materials, and these are I'm using an out of the box template, architectural template for Revit 2020, and these are all the materials that are in the project by default. So just for simplicity's sake, let's use this wood stain, and we'll start seeing where this can be painted on these different objects. So I've got a wall, we'll look at a door, just a basic component, columns. This is a floor, a roof, a ramp, and a stair. So what happens when I click the paint tool, I get all the materials that come up. I select the material I want to paint, and as I highlight over these different elements, you can see the portion that would be painted. So, and you'll notice that by the edges that are lit up across this wall. So right there we can see that top face of the wall is what would be painted. So if I click on that front, you can see that wood is immediately painted to the front face of that wall. Pretty simple. There's not a whole lot there. Again, it is a pretty simple tool. Same as the wall, but you'll notice here that the door itself does not work. It will begin to look like the door can be painted, but it's not. I can tab and select the inner side of the wall that the door is cutting, so I can paint that. Typically I would not paint that, but that's just something to know. Walls or doors cannot be painted. This is a basic component family, probably a generic model family from out of the box tools and Revit, and no face can be painted here. There's nothing that can be painted. When it comes to columns in fact can be painted, so I can paint that first half side of the column as well as the top face there. Same as square columns. I can paint that. I can basically paint every face. The floors here, the floor works. I can paint that front side of the floor there, the wood. Roofs work as well, so any face of this roof I can paint. Ramps work all the same, basically similar to floors, but they're ramps. It's actually angled. And stairs, pretty nice. You can paint just about any face of this stair. So if I have, this wood material on the treads, and I have a different material on all the risers, something like that, that's how you would easily achieve applying different materials to a stair pretty quickly. So once we've gone through that, it's pretty simple. There's not a whole lot you need to worry about. It's more about what can be painted and what can't be. So a good rule of thumb is system families within Revit are able to be painted. And those system families are ceilings, curtain wall mullions, I think, model text, there's railings, ramps, obviously roofs, stairs, I think even structural foundations, walls. But something to help you with and remind you what those system families are is if you go to File, New Family, basically every family that you do not see here that is a template is a system family. For example, if I were to create a wall out of, basically make a wall family, there's no such thing as a wall family because there's no wall template family. So that's just something to be aware of. and that will help if you're trying to figure out what can be painted and what cannot be painted. Let's now look at the remove paint tool. This is, if you thought the paint tool was simple, the remove paint is also very simple. So I can come along here and I will only have the option to remove the paint on a face that has been painted. So no face on this entire wall has been painted, so I don't even have the option. There's no highlighted edges to notate that I can remove the paint from that face of the wall. Whereas this face of the wall, I can clearly see that I can remove that. Just remove it just like that. You can see if you know, it helps to know if you have something painted, then you don't have to fish around if you're trying to remove the paint. So that's a pretty quick and simple tool to use to get the paint off. Something else about the paint tool that's very nice is, let's select our wood stained again. I'll go ahead and paint this wall, and you'll notice that the tooltip that pops up over the wall and the edge that I have highlighted there, I have to bring it back, there it is. The tooltip being walls, basic wall, generic 8-inch face. It's basically saying this is a wall, this is a wall, it's a family, it's a wall. And then basic wall being the type of wall that it is, the generic, the specific type. And let's actually look at these. So there it is, basic wall, generic 8-inch wall. And whenever we highlight, we can see all of this. And the final thing is face. And so basically this is saying we are selecting the face of this particular type of wall all the way down the line. So let's apply that paint again. And now that we've applied the paint, when I highlight over this particular area again, at the very end you can see that the tooltip now says painted with wood-stained. So it's a good way to tell what material has been painted to that particular object, which is very nice. And if I'm not mistaken, this actually works with the remove paint tool as well. And this is, I think it's even better to use off the remove paint tool, because just like we said before, I can look around to remove paint, and if I don't have a dialog come up and no edges highlight when I'm trying to remove paint from these edges, then there's no paint that's applied to any of these faces. But as soon as I come across something like this roof that has paint applied, I can immediately see those edges highlight, which is very helpful. And now that I also, if I stop and look at that tooltip that pops up, I can see specifically which material has been painted on that particular face. And so that's just very good to know moving forward. Now let's go into elevation. I've got this elevation made of all these elements, and let's go to make this a fine and realistic view so we can see all our materials applied. Now let's go look at the split face. And what does the split face do? When I select it, again, it's asking me based on this icon and by this notation down here, it's telling me to select a face that I want to split. So let's go to this wall that has not been painted, and you can see as I get to a face of the wall, I again have these edges highlighted, and with the tooltip that comes up that says this is the face of the wall. So I'll click that edge of the wall and I get those highlights showing up again, but as these orange boundary lines. And so this is basically saying if we applied paint, where would that paint go? Well, that paint would go around, it would basically use those orange lines as a boundary line to where it would get the area of that particular painted face. So now what the split face tool does, it allows me to break that area up. And all I have to do is, I don't actually have to close anything, because these boundary lines are serving as closing boundary lines. So I'm basically just splitting it with this line down the middle there, and if this works correctly, we should have two different sections that are each painted, or they can each be painted individually. So as soon as I do that, not much happens except I still see this line, and if I highlight, or if I hover over that, I'll see that that is a split face region, and it's a split face. So now this is going to be nice whenever we go to paint. So let's go back to the paint tool, and we'll go the actual paint tool. We'll go down to that wood stained, and now as I highlight over this particular face of the wall, I could see that the tooltip now says face region, indicating that it's not the entire face or default face of the wall. I have now, in a way, edited it to include a region. So this is just basically a portion of that total wall face. So now what this allows me to do is to paint these different face regions either the same or a different material in that case. So how about we do door panel for this side. And so now we can clearly see that we've got two different kinds of woods painted on this wall, and I'm sure there are plenty of applications for this because maybe you have different colored bricks, maybe you have different color wood, maybe it's a completely different material, but it's on the same wall, so you'll need to split the face to allow the areas to calculate correctly, or for just the elevations to show up correctly. So now maybe that's something that we're after, but that's an example of how we can use the split face to get these different options. If I also again highlight over this area, I can see that it says painted with wood dash stain. I can see the paint that's applied, and if I hover over here, I can clearly see that it's painted with door dash panel. So these two different materials show up. Something else that is nice is when it comes to the split face, maybe we want to split this even further. A lot of times one wall is not just one material, maybe it's two, but in certain circumstances maybe it's three or more. So let's again go to this, and what we'll see as we highlight this area, we'll see it's a face region. It's just a portion of the wall, but we can click it just like we would anything else and start to split this area as well. So I'll just split it right there, and again I'm just splitting it between these orange boundary lines. I accept that, and I can see, okay, I now have these two split faces there. But you'll also notice that because I had already painted this portion of the wall before, this new face that I split did not update. Now that I have a split face there, I can go in and maybe change that to a cherry. And now I can see it's painted with wood stain, but as soon as I click, it's painted with cherry. That's very nice, very helpful. You can basically take this an infinite number of of times down. You can get a lot of different split faces in here if you need. You can even window things out like that. Hit OK. We'll even change this to another material. Maybe this is a carpet on the wall because I don't know. Why would that? Better yet, let's just change it to a brick. So this wall looks completely terrible, and you probably wouldn't have something like this, but I hope this serves as a good example of how versatile using the split face tool is. So something else nice is because we painted all these materials and the fact that they're actually applied to the face of the wall, they will appropriately tag an elevation. So I'm in an elevation view. Let's go to the material tag, and because I don't have any value set on these materials, nothing pops up. But you can see as I get to these other materials that the fact that I have the end of the tag over that material means it's going to pull the data from that tag or from that material. So let's put the common brick out here, and we will put that there. Yeah, you can see how that starts to work, and we didn't have to do anything super fancy. We're just able to do all this work within an elevation view by splitting the face, applying the materials, and getting the data that's pulled from those materials. So let's go to this brick material, and just to remind myself, let's highlight this and see that this is called Brick Common. So I'll go to the Manage tab and Materials. And let's go to brick common. There's brick common. We'll go to the identity tab, and we can see that this particular default material tag is pulling from the description. So common brick. So maybe I change that to red, and you can see as I update that, the tag also does as well. And that's basically telling you that this is a live material, everything is live, and the fact that you have painted the material on there means that it's going to pull the data correctly. And that's very nice. Go back to a 3D view, and the final thing I want to do in this video is to schedule this data, particularly the material data, because there's something to know and even remember when it comes to painting a material versus applying a material. If you remember at the beginning of the video, I first mentioned that you can apply material to a wall or to anything. You can actually apply it, and if I go into the wall properties, into the structure, this is where I would apply that material. So that's one way of applying the material. But another would be through the paint tool itself and applying that material to each face or a face of the wall like we did throughout this entire video. So now, maybe when we want to start to get the area of these materials that we've painted or applied. So let's go to the View tab, we'll go to Schedules, a Material Takeoff. Let's call this Material Takeoff. We'll hit OK. Let's see, what do we need here? We obviously need the material area, like we said. We'd like to see what the material is applied to. We'll do the family and type. We need material name for sure so we know what it's called. Put that at the top. Okay, that looks good. Let's go to sorting. I will first sort by name. I'll make that a header, have the footer, and I'll put the footer to totals only because we want to see the calculated totals of the area of all the materials applied. We'll then sort by family, type, and then finally area, because why not? We don't need to see every instance because I don't care about everything except the particular type of material. We'll go to formatting, and we'll actually hide the name because we have that shown as a header right there. Go back to formatting and make sure that the area is set to calculate totals. And I think that should show us everything that we would like to see. Let's expand these. Great. So now we can see what materials are currently applied throughout a project. But just like this whole tutorial has been specifically about paint, split faces, and then applying more paints to the split faces, we want to be able to tell which of these different materials is a paint or something like that so we can get an idea, because if we look in here and we could see that some of these materials are painted, in fact all of these materials are painted, but this material in the column and this material, this base material in the wall that's applied, they're there as well, but they may or may not be paints. In this case, they're definitely not paints, so we did not paint them. So let's go back to the schedule. I'll go to the fields, and down here there's actually a material as paint. Let's add that to the end, and I think we're good. So now we can see here, let's expand that a bit. You can see material as paint. It will show you throughout every material applied to all of these different model elements if it's a paint or not. So something interesting is that we can have the same material that's applied as a paint or not. So let's use the brick common as an example. So I'll go to this column and let's change this material to the brick common. Brick common there, we'll hit OK, go back to the schedule. And so now we can see that the brick common material is showing up as 1 square foot as a painted area on that wall, which is right there. And also showing up on that entire concrete column, which that does not make sense, but it's just the material applied to that column. And that material again is right there. So that's something to be aware of for sure when you're doing material takeoffs, because it's Revit by default is going to pull all the materials applied in the project, whether it's through a paint or through the actual application of material to that element in the element properties. Something else that's important to know is if I go to this wall and I change this wall to the wall material to that brick common, I'll hit OK, OK, go back to the schedule. Now we can see that that wall, which I have is 100 square feet, is not applied as a paint. That's something to be aware of. So that's very important, because what happens when, actually it's accounting for both of those walls. Each of them are 50 square feet. That makes sense. So part of the problem now is this 1 square foot of painted material that just so happens to be the same material as the entire wall, is that being counted as well? Well, do we see 1 square foot of brick common? We actually do not. So Revit takes care of that for us, which is very helpful, because if we saw brick common as painted here, it would show up as paint and say yes somewhere in here, but we don't. We don't see it. So that's good to know. If you have painted an element with the same material that it is applied to the entire element, it will not be double counted. That is very good to know moving forward. So I hope you're all able to learn something when it comes to using the paint tool, the remove paint tool, and the split face tool in Revit 2020. If you did, please like the video and subscribe. It definitely helps me a lot. If you have any criticism, please leave those in the comments. I'll read every comment and respond to you as soon as I can. But until the next video, thanks for watching.